Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Kristin Harmel.
I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
And I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And this is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support independent bookstores, authors, and librarians.
Hey, if you're not with us already, we hope you'll join our Facebook group, which is more than 300,000 members strong.
Crazy.
We'd also like to invite you to follow us on Instagram and YouTube and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which is full of awesome bonus content. You can find out more about our community and all we have to offer at friendsandfiction.com.
Now, on this episode, we are so excited to welcome best-selling author Mitch Albom to discuss his new novel, Twice, which was just released yesterday on October 7th.
And remember, everyone, because we're live tonight, you can put your questions in for Mitch. We will pull them up and we will do our very best to bring him online and ask him a few of them.
All right. Now, the premise of this novel, which is fabulous, it is called Twice, which we will dig into in just a moment with Mitch. It involves a character who can do any moment of his life over, but he can only live each moment twice. And then he has to live with the consequences of whatever he's done because he doesn't get another redo. So I'm curious, if you could do one moment of your life over, which one would it be? Kristy?
Oof.
Well, I mean, you would have to say like when little Will was born, right? I mean, just that like moment of like getting to, hold your baby for the first time. But I have to be honest, when I saw this question first, I was like, every moment that I was between the ages of like 16 and 25 and wearing a cover up.
Fair.
What was I thinking?
Yes, I made a lot of similarly questionable decisions. Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing if you could just go back and redo those mistakes?
Yeah, and you would see, and like your 40-year-old self would see your like 18-year-old self and be like, "Dang, you look good." Go.
Mary Kay, how about you?
Well, not to put a damper on the hilarity, I would go back to the fall of 2021 when my daughter Katie was diagnosed with COVID and she couldn't get better and she couldn't get seen by her doctor. And if I could do it all over again, I would raise holy hell and I would drag her to a doctor and make sure that she got the care she needed. Because by the time she did get seen, it was too late and she was in liver failure.
We'd go with you. We would do that redo and we would storm the hospital with you, Mary Kay.
All of us. But I mean, how could you have known? I mean, it was
you can't.
And none of us could have ever predicted that. Absolutely. Patti, what about you? Is there a moment in your life you would choose to redo?
I've thought about this ever since I read the book last week.
Yeah.
By the way, I read the book in a flurry of one sitting on an airplane and
fabulous.
Couldn't put it down. But sadly, it made me think of so many moments I would have said sorry or not said something. More so, it's what I shouldn't have said than what I did say. But if the magic genie sat in front of me and said, you can redo 1 minute, I would pick something to enjoy again, not fix, because there's so many things I would need to fix. But like my son's wedding, which was 1.5 years ago, or my own wedding, anywhere where all the people I love are in one place.
Well, that totally makes sense. But what I really liked so much about this book was that it wasn't so much about the redo, but how you have to live with the consequences of the redo, that
Yeah.
you only get to do it one time. And, you might alter something in a way that reverberates forward in a way you couldn't have seen. So I'm so excited to dig in with Mitch about this in a moment. And all of you out there watching live, we would love to hear what you think too. So again, if you have questions for Mitch,
Hey, but what
please
about you?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I prepared the question and then didn't actually think of my own answer to it.
Like, we're going to get off easy.
I would have thought of my own answer to the question. That would be my redo.
No.
No, so seriously, all of you watching out there live, we would love to hear what you think too. So if you could choose a moment to redo, but you had to live with the consequences of whatever happened on that redo, we would love to hear what it would be. So make sure to plug that in, plug your questions for Mitch in. So, all right, now you've heard enough from us. Let's give you a little bit of background on Mitch Albom.
So Mitch is an internationally renowned and best-selling author, journalist, screenwriter, playwright, radio and television broadcaster. There's more, and musician. He has written 8 #1 New York Times bestsellers, including the beloved Tuesdays with Morrie, one of the best-selling memoirs of all time. His books have collectively sold 42 million copies worldwide. They've been published in 51 territories and 48 languages all around the world, and have been made into Emmy Award-winning and critically acclaimed TV and movies.
In 2006, Mitch founded the nonprofit Say Detroit, which provides pathways to success for Detroiters in need through major health, housing, and education initiatives. He also operates Have Faith Haiti, a home and school for impoverished children and orphans in Port-au-Prince, which he visits monthly. Mitch lives with his wife, Janine, in Michigan.
His new novel, Twice, was just released yesterday on October 7th, and it is a stunning love story that dares to explore how our unchecked desires might mean losing what we've had all along.
Mm.
Jay, can you bring Mitch on?
Hi,
Hey,
Mitch.
Hi.
Hi
Hi,
there.
everybody.
Welcome to Friends in Fiction. So,
Thank you so much for having me.
we're thrilled that you're here. We loved the book. We're really excited that we're here talking to you about it. So, this gorgeous novel, which has already been optioned by Netflix, is the story of a man named Alfie Logan, who has known since he was 8 that he has the ability to go back in any moment of his life to have a do-over or a second try. While others must suffer the consequences of their actions, he explains, I can undo mine and try again. The catch is he doesn't ever get a second do-over. He can only live a moment twice, hence the title. And he has to live with the consequences of his actions if that do-over doesn't go the way he hoped. So we meet him at the start of the book being questioned by a detective in the Bahamas who thinks Alfie cheated to win millions at a casino roulette wheel. And through the interrogation, we get Alfie's astounding story, which is at its heart an utterly unique love story told in an utterly unique way. So that's a little bit about the book, but can you tell us a bit more? And our favorite question, what do you think the book is really about at its core?
It's really about the idea that the grass is always greener and how that often proves to be untrue. And Alfie gets to do things twice, as you point out, but and it has to live with the consequences of a second try. So when he goes along in his adolescence, he does probably what all of us would do. He fixes his embarrassing mistakes, many of which were my mistakes that I just put in his, in his life. And he takes a lot of dangerous chances. He goes into a lion's cage at the zoo, and he rides his bicycle into traffic because he knows there's no consequences. All he has to do is say twice, and he goes back. But then when he becomes a man, he discovers that there is one caveat to his power. It doesn't work with love. And in fact, it kind of works the opposite. If someone truly loves you and you decide to go back in time and try somebody else, that first person can never love you again. They can be in the world, you can know them, but they can never love you again. And of course, at one point in the story, he has to make a very fateful decision about his power because he thinks he's found the perfect woman, then they're married, but then temptation comes along. So what I wanted to do, to answer your question, was to write a novel that explored that whole grass is always greener thing, but also made love the central kind of dish on the table. And that's why I made it an exception to the rule, because I do think that love is different than a missed basketball shot. You go back and you make the shot and you win the game. Loving somebody and having a real relationship is a long time thing. And the first day is as important as the 1,000th day. And so if you want to suddenly interrupt it, go try somebody else and then come back and pick it up where you left off. That's as impossible to do as taking water that's already run downstream and putting it back upstream. So that's what I think it's about. That's what I hope when people are done, they think it's about too.
Oh, absolutely. Mitch, before we brought you on, we talked a little bit about moments of our lives we would redo if we had them to do again. Is there a moment in your life you would choose to redo with these rules?
Well, okay. I have two answers to that. I'm sorry to fudge your question. So, yes.
We fudged all around. So,
well, yes. I mean, there are.
Kristin didn't even answer it.
So. Exactly. I slithered out of it.
There are many moments that I would redo if it was simply a case of redoing them, and some are just to save me being a total idiot, and others are more poignant. There's a scene in the book when Alfie's 8 years old. It's actually the opening scene, and he's living in Africa with his parents. They're missionaries, and his mother gets very sick, and she's sleeping in bed, and his father says, "Go sit with your mother. I got to go get some medicine, so just go sit with her." And he sits with her, but she's sleeping, and he's 8, and it's the middle of the day, and he wants to go outside and play. So he goes and plays with his Superman cape and pretending to be Superman and pretending to fly. And then when he comes back in after a few hours, he discovers his mother died while he was out. And this upsets him so much that it actually brings on the power, because he spends the night just wishing he could have the day over again. And he's so mad at himself. And when he wakes up, it's the previous day, and the cape is around him again. And he goes and sits with his mother and gets one more discussion with her before she dies. And my mother died while I was on an airplane. And so there's a line in the book where Alfie says, "My mother died while I was trying to fly." And I wrote that because that's what happened to me. And I had just seen her, and I was flying home from seeing her, and she died while I was on the plane. And so, sure, I would like to have that moment over again, knowing if that was going to be my last chance to see her, to say some certain things. Mm-hmm. However, and here's the fudge part, if you said to me, you get to do these moments over, but you have to unlearn what you learned as a result of that mistake or that moment, or you have to unchange how you changed as a result of that moment, then I would say no, thank you, because I wouldn't evolve, and the things that I've learned from my mistakes are the things that have made me hopefully better for what's coming next.
Absolutely. That was so well said. Yeah.
We love to talk on Friends in Fiction about the origin of stories, where do the ideas come from. So I'd love to start off by asking you, first of all, to tell us about the initial germ, the seed of this story. Where did that come from in your mind?
Well, I think I write a little bit differently than a lot of other writers. I play in a band with a bunch of writers. You probably know some of them: Stephen King and Amy Tan and Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson, Scott Turow, James McBride. And over the years, we've been playing together for years. And so over the years, we've chit-chatted about, the different ways that we write. And they come up with these characters and these plots. And I don't do any of that. I come up with a theme that interests me. Wow. And I say, how do I want to spend the next year and a half? And I pick a theme before I ever have a story. And then I say, all right, I want to explore that theme. How can I create a story around that theme? And it's been funny because over the years, like I wrote a book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. And it was a very popular book. And everybody assumed that I just had all these religious ideas about heaven. And I had to write a book about heaven. And the truth is, I I wasn't going to write anything about heaven. The idea was to write a book about, the theme was that people who don't think that they matter in life, and to try to explore the fact that everybody matters. Everybody touches somebody in some way. You know, you don't even know, you're driving down the highway and somebody veers into your lane and you honk your horn, you know, and you wake them up and they veer back. You just saved their life. And then you drive past them and give them the finger, you know, or something, but you just saved their life, and you don't even know, you don't even know their names. So everybody has consequence. And that was the story I wanted to write, but I ended up setting it in heaven because I thought, well, that'll be cool. They'll be in heaven, and if 5 people can meet him in heaven and tell him all the little things that he did in his life. And when it came out, of course, everybody assumed that I was like writing a religious book or a heaven book, but that wasn't my initial idea. So to answer your question, the idea was, the theme was wanting what you don't have, you know, and thinking that life would be better if you had only done this or only done that. The grass would have been greener. And then I created a story that would try to drive that point home.
I love that. That's interesting that you start with theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I love that. All right, so I'm very curious on how you settled on the framework for this story, which is really unique. So for the readers out there, instead of just sort of a linear story through Alfie's life, it's all framed by the police investigation in the present and this detective who doesn't believe him. So can you talk about why and how you chose this framework, or did it just sort of come to you?
I think from a writing perspective, if the people who are watching are interested in writing, so that was a very conscious writing decision, because I knew I was creating a time travel story. And I know from time travel movies that I've seen and all, that anytime you do a time travel story, people start going, well, wait a minute. So if it works like this, or what if you step on a butterfly? You know, there's always that kind of thing. And I knew that I didn't want to have to write paragraphs that explain that, because it's too much exposition. You know, I didn't want to have Alfie saying, if you're thinking about how this power works with this, here's how it is. So I came up with the idea of the fact that he gets arrested at the beginning of the book. He's older, of course, and he gets arrested, and the cop who has arrested him, or the detective who's arrested him, asks him, you know, how'd you do it? And finally he says, you know, if you want to understand how I did it, read this notebook. And it's a notebook that tells his whole story. And the whole reason I did that really was so that I would have a character in there who would be able to be the reader, who would say, wait a minute, wait. You just said that you can go back and do everything again, you know, and so that's what the cop does throughout the course of the book. Like a section of his life story is read, and then all of a sudden we cut back to the interrogation, and the cop is saying, wait a minute, you're saying to me that, you know, if you go back, then you don't remember what you had before? Yes. And they have the discussion about it. Then there's more of the story. And then the cop says, oh, you know, it's pretty funny. You kind of feel very sorry for yourself, for a guy who has the magic power to go back and do everything. So I'm sort of anticipating what the reader will be almost saying and putting it into the detective's mouth, so that I can address that as part of the story. So that was really a device for him to be interrogated. And then I kind of fell in love with the character as we went along. You know, at first he was just supposed to be this detective, but then I started to imagine him as this kind of weary, grizzled, slightly overweight guy who's on his second marriage, and starts to hear Alfie talk about love and this woman he's in love with, and starts thinking about his own life and what he would do differently, and how he treats his own wife. And he sort of becomes a major character in the book by the end. But initially it was just to have a voice to answer all those questions that I knew were going to come with the time travel story.
I love that.
He's us. We're him.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because the minute a question pops up in your head, like, that doesn't work, the cop asks for us about how it works.
Exactly.
So genius. All right, Mitch, you started your career as an author in 1989 by co-authoring an autobiography of legendary University of Michigan coach Bo Schembechler. The title of that book was Bo, which makes me think of Bo Jackson, but we won't go there.
Life, in Michigan, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Life, laughs, and lessons of a college football legend. Now, I'm struck by your subtitle because to some extent, that sums up what you've been writing ever since: Life, Laughs, and Lessons. You followed that with a book about a Michigan basketball star, then Tuesdays with Morrie, 5 People You Meet in Heaven. We could talk forever about the scope of your huge career, but I'd like to know, between the fiction and the nonfiction, if you say you start with theme, but do you see one theme or through line through all your work?
Yes. Well, not through the 2 sports books that you mentioned. But after Tuesdays with Morrie, the through line is redemption. You'll find a character in every one of my books who is dealing with something, is flawed, and by the end comes to realize what he or she didn't know, and is redeemed in some way. And I don't mind repeating that because I think that deep down, that's what we all want in our lives. And I don't think we ever get tired of wanting it. We want to be redeemed for the mistakes that we made. We want to be well thought of by our children. We want to be the spouse that we thought we were going to be when we said I do. You know, we want to be that person at work that everybody likes and admires. We want to be better, you know. And so of course Tuesdays with Morrie, that was a real life version of that. And I you know, I'm a perfect person to kind of write twice, and it doesn't escape me, and it shouldn't escape people who know me that, you know, I've lived a twice life. I mean, my first 37 years, up to when I was 37, I was just this ambitious, gung-ho sports writer. I would never be doing a podcast like this with all of you accomplished writers. I just wanted to be as big as I possibly could in the sports writing world and sports broadcasting world. I worked 100 hours a week. I was on ESPN all the time. I had a radio show constantly. I wrote 5 columns a week, and I was just going a million miles an hour. And then I hit the brakes when I ran into my old college professor who was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease, and I hadn't kept in touch with him for 16 years because I was being so ambitious. And I felt so guilty about it. I went to go see him, which I thought would be once. And then I went again, and then I went again. And I started going every Tuesday. And we basically fell into this rhythm of a class about what's important in life when you really know you're going to die. And that started to sort of change my perspective at 37. And then I wrote the book, Tuesdays with Morrie, just to pay Morrie's medical bills. I mean, a lot of people think somehow that was destined to be some big book. Nothing could be further from the truth. That nobody wanted that book. Every publisher I went around to New York threw me out of their office. Not interested. It's boring. You're a sports writer. Nobody's going to read it. And it's only because, nobody wanted it. And it was only because I wanted to help pay Morrie's medical bills, which was really the first kind thing that I had done purely for somebody else, and not for me, or not by accident. And we finally found a publisher who was willing to do it. And, that was a few weeks before Morrie died. Morrie never read a word of Tuesdays with Morrie. And I wrote it very simply after he died. I gave him all the money and so that he could pay off the bills. And I kind of thought I'd be going back to being a sports writer. And this would just be this sort of weird thing. And they printed 20,000 total copies for the world. And I thought I'd have them in the trunk of my car for the rest of my life and be giving them out to people when they passed, or bring them for Christmas. And then it became this thing that, no one could have predicted, and it took over my life. And instead of people coming to talk to me about who's going to win the Super Bowl, they would come and tell me about their mother dying of cancer and how they read Tuesdays with Morrie together. Or I'd get asked to speak to ALS groups and asked to speak to hospice groups and things like that. And so my world became much more about that. And when it came time to write the next thing, which was 6 years later, I wasn't writing sports books anymore. I wanted to write about these themes and everything that's happened since, all the charities and all the stuff in Haiti and all of our kids that we take care of. It's all because of this pivot that happened when I was 37. And so I know what it's like to live a twice life, but I also know that you don't it doesn't require magical power. And that's kind of what goes back to the question you asked me at the very beginning. What's the book really about? In the end, by the time you finish the whole thing, you come to realize that your second chance is, everybody has a second chance. It's called the next minute of your life. And everything that you've learned up till this minute informs you about what you're about to do with that second chance. And my life has been like that. And so I've totally forgotten whatever question you asked.
No, you answered it.
It was amazing. Yeah.
And that is
That's it.
so powerful. The question was the theme through all your work, and you said redemption. And that's a powerful story, because the creative act that you did with Maury not only changed his life, but yours and thousands of other people, hundreds of thousands, through your work, through your charity, through your stories. So yeah, that's a really powerful story. And a theme, it makes me think when you were talking of that line, none of us are the worst thing we ever did. That can't be the definition of who we are. So we mentioned earlier that Netflix bought film rights to Twice, but we didn't mention the incredible news that Paul Weitz, whose name I think I'm saying correctly, who also wrote and directed About a Boy, will be writing and directing. So, Mitch, because we don't know, we need you to tell us what it's like to write your own adaptations and then see them come alive on the screen. Do you write with the adaptations in mind, or is that a separate thing for you?
No, I don't think you should ever write a movie when you're writing a novel. Let somebody else figure out how to make that. And I've had 4 of my books already done into movies. I have every one of the other ones is in development of some kind or another. And some of those developments can take 10 times longer than it ever took to write the book. And, and I don't know if they'll ever see the light of day. In this case, Twice, it's the first time it's ever happened to me, but they bought it before it came out. And to be honest, they bought it before it was finished, because I was still working on it, and the draft that they got a hold of was like an early draft of the book, and I still had 2 or 3 more drafts to go. So I kind of felt bad. I said, well, I hope they don't mind the things I changed, because they bought something else. But I met Paul, and they Netflix had me, meet with him, and I love him. He's great, and he's sensitive, and the book was all marked up, and he said, I want to do this. This is my wife. This is my wife and my story, and I want to. So I thought that was perfect. As far as the question that you asked about, it is kind of interesting. Tuesdays with Morrie was made into a film by Oprah Winfrey, and that was really weird, because I went to the set one time and I walked in. I actually walked in when the red light was spinning outside, because I didn't know what that meant. I thought that was like, here, come in here. And so I opened the door. First word I heard was cut. And it wasn't very pleasant. And the director was, who's that? And when they saw it was me, I guess they gave me. But Jack Lemmon was there, and Hank Azaria was there playing Maury and myself, and I watched them do a scene, and it looked very much like the room where Maury and I were. And I heard Jack Lemmon, he kept calling Hank Azaria Mitch. And when you hear your own name, you sort of, you always hear differently your own name. And I just found it terribly weird, and I never went back. It was the only day that I went to the set, although Jack Lemmon and I became friends, and Hank Azaria and I are still friends. And I adored Jack Lemmon, and he was dying from cancer when he was making that movie, and it was very poignant. But I didn't have, that was weird to see yourself portrayed. And then The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, which was my first novel, and I had created this amusement park called Ruby Pier, and I went out to the set, and I walked out there, and there was this amusement park called Ruby Pier, and it's like, holy cow, like, this is everything that I wrote, and they just built it. And it's very, very strange. It's amazing. It's kind of delightful and fun to see your imagination, built out of sawhorses and things like that. But awesome. Yeah, it was cool. But you also have to, there's a lot of flip side to the Hollywood stuff. You have to surrender a lot of input, and you have to basically say, you know, a movie's a movie and a book's a book,
Yeah.
and don't try to make them the same, and don't get upset if they're not, because you'll be very angry all the time. But I'm very blessed that there's interest in Twice, and I'm looking forward to that. And please don't ask me who's going to play the parts, because I've been asked that already on several TV shows, and it's been embarrassing because they've had like pictures of the actors already there, and nobody's asked them, you know. So
Well,
like,
we weren't
yeah,
going to ask you, but now we definitely won't.
No.
Brad Pitt would be great, you know, and it's like, but nobody's talked to Brad Pitt, and we don't. I feel bad. Like they might be walking past the TV set, seeing their picture up there, saying, "I'm not going to be in that movie." So,
No, I'm definitely not going to be in that movie.
yeah, really. Yeah.
I love it.
Mitch, I often think as I read your work that I can see, in a good way, of course, the influence of your journalism career in the way that you write. 3 of the 4 of us, myself included, actually come from journalism backgrounds. I was a reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but I can't believe that you're actually still writing regular columns for the Detroit Free Press, quite prolifically, in fact. You write both regular sports columns and opinion columns. Could you talk about how you think your work as a journalist shaped the novelist you are today?
Well, the biggest way is I turn my books in on time, which I actually found out is not common in the book world. And I was shocked. Like there was one time where I had to ask if I could get like a couple days over the weekend before I turned it in. And I said, I'm really sorry. They said, are you kidding? It's like, we have novelists who like are 2 years late on their books. And I'm like, okay, you don't get to do that when you're a sports writer.
Yeah.
So that was one way. Another way was, that was very helpful, was that you're not married to your sentences. You're willing to kill your babies, as they say in journalism. And that's very important, because I know a lot of writers who just get stuck. They don't want to edit anything out. They don't want to lose a sentence, and they torture themselves over it. And I always say the reader doesn't know what's not there. They only know what is there. And so examine what is there. Don't torture yourself over, yeah, but I threw away that one line. Does it work with what's actually on the page? Yes or no? And if it does, don't worry about the invisible stuff that no one's going to see. And that I learned from journalism, and how to write quickly, and also how to write succinctly. I think that's important too. And here's another thing, the rhythm of a sentence, which I think is really important. I was a musician, you know, I was kind of my first love, and trained at that. And really, if I had my druthers, that's all I'd be doing. I'd never have written a thing. But I tried, and it didn't work. It didn't work out, and I kind of fell into writing, and writing became the thing I put my energy into. But I still would. Everything to me is a beat and a rhythm, and I find and when you write for a newspaper, you know, and you get a column, I mean, they're not going to stay with it if it doesn't hold their interest. And the best compliment I think I ever got as a newspaper person was people would say to me, you know, when I read your columns, I start and I get to the bottom really fast, and other ones I have to like stop and read the paragraph again and stop and read the paragraph again. But yours I get right to the bottom. And I think a lot of that is because of cadence of the writing, and you want to write with a certain beat, you know. And even when I write, I actually bob back and forth. I didn't realize this until my wife told me. She said she would stand there and she said, you do realize like you do this constantly when you write. And then I started paying attention to it, and I realized when I stop bobbing, that's when something's going wrong. Like there's something wrong with, you know. And so if I can't have the rhythm to the paragraph and can't have the rhythm to the page, then there's something wrong. And journalism helped teach me that too.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, Mitch, we have some amazing live questions coming in from our viewers. So we're going to take just a minute to ask you a few of those. Kristy, do you want to pull one?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have so many. So I love this one. This is from Irene Justice. She says, to what extent does your faith shape your writing? Do you feel compelled to use your platform to reflect or share your understanding of God?
Greatly. I've actually written a book about faith called Have a Little Faith, a nonfiction book. I also have to be very careful that I don't want to be dogmatic in my books. You know, I don't want to choose a faith or say this is the way to go, or, you know, and this is the only right faith or anything like that. So I think you'll find a lot of spirituality in my books and a lot of hints of God or faith. But I'm also aware of not being heavy-handed on it. I try to feel that the themes that I write about and the inspiration thing and the hope, which I've been teased about and criticized about by kind of cynical book critics, but I never understood why anybody finds flaw with hope. I mean, I think it's the most precious commodity we have. And I work in Haiti every month, and if you don't have hope, you can't get through the day there. And so I feel that those qualities or those themes are universal to all faiths and inspire people of their whatever faith they bring to the book to sort of take it home and put it into their faith without me saying this is a Christian idea, this is a Jewish idea, this is a Muslim idea. Some books, God is more to the front and center. I wrote a couple books ago called The Stranger in the Lifeboat about 10 people who survive a boat explosion and are in a lifeboat for 3 days and they think they're going to die, and they're calling out, help us God, help us God. And then this guy floats up in the water, like bobbing in the water, and they pull him in, and he says he's God, but he's fat and he's kind of normal looking, and they don't believe him because they just think he's some nutcase. And it's all about, do we accept help when it's in front of us, or do we always just want to see it the way that we think it is? So there, God's kind of a character in the book. In other books, like in Twice, really there's not a lot of God in the book, except there is a sentence that repeats itself over and over again, which Alfie hears from his mother just before she dies, because he says to her, I don't want you to die again. And she says, I want, you want, and God does what God wants.
Yep.
And even though that's one sentence, it repeats itself multiple times in the book. And so this will be a case where I kind of weave it in the background. But the answer to the question is, yeah, it's there's something always there.
That was a great question and an excellent answer. Patti, do you want to pull a live question?
I'm going to switch gears from faith over to music, which is a sort of faith. Renee I'm going to say this wrong. Renee Herskowitz. I think I said it right.
Ooh,
What instrument does Mitch play in the band with the other authors? And I'm going to add to it, tell me the instruments everybody else plays too.
So I play the keyboards, the piano, and all that stuff. I also do the Elvis impersonation.
Oh, I can't wait to see it one day.
Yeah, you really aren't missing anything.
No, I am missing something. I'm totally missing something.
Let's see. Dave Barry plays guitar, plays pretty well. Ridley Pearson plays bass. Stephen King plays guitar. Amy Tan plays nothing. I think maybe a tambourine. Scott Turow plays nothing. He wears a big wig and sings funny songs. James McBride is a great musician. The guy who wrote The Color of Water and Good Lord Bird and everything. He's a great musician. He's a real jazz musician. Frank McCourt didn't play anything. Oh God, we've had so many people come. Carl Hyacinth's played with us. He plays guitar. We have a ringer drummer and a ringer saxophone player. So there's always someone to keep the beat. And some of us have played, like I made a living at music at one point, and Dave did and Ridley did. So we can, as long as the song doesn't have more than 3 chords, we're fine.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Is it the Rock Bottom Remainders? Am I remembering that correctly? Is that the name?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can only play Gloria Gloria so many times a night.
Yes, and yet we play it every time because there's only one chord in that. In fact, Bruce Springsteen came on stage with us and played that song with us once.
That's awesome.
I heard the Remainders at the Miami Book Festival one year, and I think that's the song I heard him play.
Yeah, we played that one. We played that with Bruce Springsteen. It was so stupid. He came out on stage. We were in LA at the Roxy nightclub or something, and he was there. Somebody brought him there, and he ran on after we never get asked for encores because we're terrible. But the crowd was clapping, so we ran back out on stage, and the last song we had left was Gloria, and Bruce Springsteen came out with us, and he sang, Gloria, and it was weird because like we thought we were doing really well, And there were about 900 people there, and it's like, wow, 900 people clapping for it. It's kind of loud. And then when we said, as Stephen King said, ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Springsteen, and he got to the of Steen, and that 900 became 90,000. The level, the volume level increased so much, and we had, for those next 3-4 minutes, we got to feel like what it must be like to actually be, a rock star on stage because of that, the screaming and the people pushing to the front and trying to get at it. And then, of course, we got trapped downstairs in the basement with him because he couldn't leave because everybody was upstairs waiting for him, that the cops had to come and everything. So while we were there, he gave us what I thought was the best advice anyone's ever given our band, because we're all around him, Stephen King, Amy, these are people who sell millions of copies of books, and they're like, Bruce Springsteen. And somehow somebody asked him something about, I don't know, and he said, well, you're not that bad, but if I were you, I wouldn't get any better, because if you get any better, then you're just going to be another lousy band. So basically we were like this below lousy, like lousy was up here and we were here. We don't want to get up there because then we'd be lousy, but down here we were just comical. So we're okay.
That is hilarious.
That is hilarious. Okay, so Mitch, on that note, if you would stick around, we have more to talk to you about. But first, we have a few very quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there. That was a great story.
Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to follow that up with announcements. Sorry, Mitch. All right, for all of you watching and listening, we encourage you right now, right this minute, at this very second, to rush out or click and buy your copies of Twice. The perfect place to do that is the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org, where you will not only be getting it at a discount, but all your purchases at bookshop.org support our show, our guests, and indie bookstores nationwide.
Yes. And don't forget to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule, upcoming in-person events, and links to our merch store, our Substack newsletter sign up, and the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa. Mark your calendars for Monday, October 20th, when they will host Morgan Ryan to discuss her new novel, A Resistance of Witches.
Hey, and speaking of our Substack, you can read all our free weekly posts on our Substack, on the Substack website or app, or subscribe for free to get them directly in your inbox. But here's what I would suggest. If you upgrade to our paid Substack, which is just $5 a month, you'll have access to deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests like Mitch, plus monthly roundtable discussions like the recent one we ran with Jack DeBrule, who took over part of the massively successful Clive Cussler adventure novel universe. If you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a big way you can... If you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a big way you can support us for about $1 each week. Check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
Okay, now back to you, Mitch. In 2006, you founded the nonprofit Say Detroit, which provides pathways to success for Detroiters in need through major health, housing, and education initiatives. You also operate Have Faith Haiti, a home and school for impoverished children and orphans in Port-au-Prince, which I believe you visit regularly. So can you tell us a little bit more about these really important missions and why they mean so much to you?
Well, I feel that if you've been given some blessings in life, you need to share them. I'll just leave it at that. And I love my city of Detroit. And I started that when I went to write a column about the homeless who were being kind of screwed over by the Super Bowl in Detroit. And I went down to spend a night at a homeless shelter to write about what it was like and why you shouldn't give it to people and take it away. And there was a guy online in front of me, and I went to just spend the night there. I didn't pretend to be anybody, but I got my bar of soap and my towel, and I was standing on line for the meal, and the guy in front of me looks me up and down. He says, "Aren't you Mitch Albom?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he looked me up and down again. He said, "So what happened to you?" And so probably comment on how I dress, but he that really stuck with me. And I thought, he had every right to ask that question. I'm sure he never expected to be there. So I ended up writing a column about that experience, tried to raise $60,000 to keep everybody in the shelter for a while. And I ended up getting $320,000 in a week. And so I used it to start this charity called Say Detroit, which has now blossomed into really, really, real big charity in Detroit. It operates 9 different things, operates rec centers and medical clinics and things like that. And there's never, and I hope we go to 10 and 11. There's so much need there. Haiti is a different story. Haiti is I mean, it's my heart and it's my family. I stumbled into it after the earthquake in 2010. I went down to help a pastor who said his orphanage had been destroyed, and I thought there were these kids under rubble, and I couldn't imagine, how you could ignore that. So I went down there, and it turned out that the orphanage hadn't been destroyed, but it had been overrun, and they were using holes in the ground for toilets, and they'd never seen a shower. They didn't have a kitchen. They didn't have and so I started going back with a bunch of volunteers, and we started building. We built the first toilets, first kitchen, first showers. And then at some point, I noticed the kids were still starving, and I mentioned it to the pastor who had been running it, and he said, "Well, I'm 84, and I don't have any money to run this." And I kind of blurted out, "Well, I could probably run this if you want me to. Can't be that hard, right?"
Yeah.
And next thing I know, he left, and I was in charge of it. And so I inherited an orphanage, and that was in 2010. And I've been there ever since, every month. For 15 years, 16 years, and we brought through well over 100 kids. Our kids come from the worst poverty that you could ever imagine. I mean, some were left under trees to die in the woods when they were infants. Some were dropped at medical malnutrition clinics. Nobody ever came back for them for 2 years. Kids with no birth certificates, no names. We don't even know how old they are, some of them. And yet when they come in, we give them, love and a home and food. And now we have a great school. It's a top-notch school that teaches in English and French for 8 hours a day. And we've had 18 kids so far who have graduated our school, and every one of them is in the States on a scholarship in college, and 2 of them are in medical school. And we have along the way, my wife and I, we adopted one of the kids a few years ago who had a brain tumor, Chica, and she became our little girl for 2 years, but she died of that brain tumor. I wrote a book about it, and amazingly, and now you want to talk about twice, we thought like there'll never be anything like that again. I mean, we got to be parents for the first time in our lives. We didn't have children of our own, and we got to be parents of this little girl for a couple of years in our 50s, and we thought, well, that'll never happen, again. But we were blessed to have those 2 years. And then 3 years ago, a little girl showed up at our orphanage who was 6 months old and had nothing to eat but sugar water for the first 6 months of her life. So she weighed 6 pounds, and she fit in my palm, and she couldn't open her eyes, and she couldn't move. And we raced her to the States, and we started her on this malnutrition program, and we would bring her to the doctor every week, just hoping she would gain an ounce, just an ounce, please, an ounce. I remember those visits. But remarkably, she opened her eyes, she started gaining weight, and now she's 3.5, and she knows all the words to tequila. The song, and she goes, tequila, like that. And she's the joy of our lives, and she's our little girl. And so we've had this miracle again, to be able to raise a child, in addition to all the kids that I consider my family in Haiti and in the States in college. So, I mean, we desperately need help, and Haiti is in terrible, terrible straits. There's, we don't have electricity, but maybe 1 hour, 2 hours a day. Water is at a premium. Fuel, food, blood. We had a kid yesterday who had to go to the hospital, and there's no blood at the hospital. We had to send people to another hospital to have blood taken out of their arms, and then we had to drive it over to the hospital. So it's a very difficult, and I wish people paid more attention to Haiti and tried to help it. But anyhow, it's an honor to be able to work with those children. It's the pleasure of my life and the joy of my life, and those kids keep everything for me in perspective, because every month I get to see, what life is like without the noise. We don't have computers, we don't have television, we don't have internet. The kids don't. And so I get to see what children are really like, when they're doing this all the time, and pretty amazing.
That is
Wow,
incredible.
Mitch. Incredible.
Wow. So, Mitch, for anyone out there who wants to find out more about this and how they can help and find out more about you and where you're going to be on tour, where would you send them?
As mundane as it sounds, mitchalbom.com. I think it's all there. The orphanage, which I prefer they find out about, is havefaithhaiti.org. Havefaithhaiti.org.
Okay.
We'll put that on the page for everybody.
Yeah.
Great.
And in the newsletter and all of that, we'll make sure to spread that around. That's
Some links
amazing.
in and all that. Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
Mitch, it was such a pleasure speaking with you tonight. We really appreciate it. You lead with such an open heart, and you bleed onto the page in this just gorgeous way. And we just appreciate you sharing all of that with us tonight.
Well, thank you, and thanks for bringing Twice to so many people. I do hope that people enjoy it, and I do hope that people realize, like I said, that you get a Twice moment in your life.
Every
all the
moment.
time. Yeah, just whatever the next minute is. Take what you've learned and apply it, and bingo, you've got a magic power. So
Tap your leg twice.
Yeah, exactly.
So everyone out there, be sure to tune in next week when Kristin and I will welcome Joe Hill, who, if you don't know, which you probably do, is Stephen King's son. Wonder if he's going to be in the band, Mitch.
he's too smart for that.
He's just as a propulsive and fascinating writer as his pops. And his new novel, King's Sorrow, is about to come out. That show will be on the Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, October 15th at 7 p.m. as always. And then on our podcast on Friday, October 17th.
All right. Thank you again, Mitch. Thank you to all of you out there for being with us. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.